You are listening to part 21 of our series, The 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Thank you, Gemini. It's always such a delight to be with you and all the listeners. And for me, it's a special thrill to get to spend this time so focused in on the detail of one of my 3 really good ideas. You know, I often tease that one of the great advantages of being older than 60 is you can look back at your life and see if you had any good ideas. And my 3 best ideas are the 3 traditions of healing, the scientific tradition which measures and fixes, the heroic tradition which attempts to balance and cleanse, but neither one of those things can ever be done, and the wise woman tradition which nourishes the wholeness of the unique individual. And then another one of my really good ideas is drinking nourishing herbal infusion. And perhaps the jewel of my 3 best ideas is the 7 medicines, the idea that we can use everything that there is available to us in our healing journeys, but that we need to have an orderly approach to it. We need to use things that are going to cause the least harm first and the most harm last, as opposed to our current modern medical system, which actually puts people into grave harm simply trying to diagnose them. So we've started at the first medicine, which is serenity medicine. And then we went on to the second medicine, story medicine. And the third medicine, mind medicine, also known as faith medicine or energy medicine. And we have gotten to the 4th medicine, which is lifestyle medicine. And in the coming weeks, we'll be looking at the 5th medicine, alternative medicine, the 6th medicine, pharmaceutical medicine, and the 7th medicine, high-tech medicine. We also remember that my books are laid out, and the remedies in my books are laid out on this pattern. In my books, I call it the 6 steps of healing, with step 0 being do nothing, step 1, collecting information, step 2, engaging the energy, step 3, nourishing and tonifying, step 4, stimulating, sedating, step 5, using drugs, and step 6, the final one, breaking and entering. So we're at nourish and tonify. We're in the 4th river of healing, the 4th medicine, lifestyle medicine. And we talked at some length when we were together last month about the difference between nourishment and tonification. You remember that I suggested that you hug somebody, and that hug is nourishment because it's yours forever and ever and it can't be taken away from you. But that if we want tonification, it has to be repeated. And then we spent quite a bit of time last month really looking into some of the more fundamental things about nourishment. And as I was thinking back about what we had said about nourishment, and there's certainly so much to say, it seemed to me that I hadn't really spent the time that I would like to spend talking about vitamins and minerals, because I think that vitamins and minerals are things that we've all kind of been brought up with the belief that they're really important. And I'm not saying they're not important, but I think if we're going to think of them as being important, we need to know more about them. Minerals basically are rocks. They are hard things. We think about iron and the kinds of things that we can make from iron, and calcium, and how, the hardness of things from calcium. So we get the idea pretty easily and pretty clearly that there's minerals in our environment, that we can see minerals in rocks, and that minerals are rocks, and that we can somehow wrap our minds around the idea that weathering breaks these rocks down and breaks them down to the level that the individual little bits of the rock, and I don't mean like the grains of sand, I mean the literal atoms of the rock, are now in the soil and are available to the plants. And so we have this very good general idea, big rock broken down into little bits broken down into their atoms in the soil. The plants get the atoms out of the soil, and then we can eat the plants and we can get those minerals, since we are obviously not going to go out there and munch on rocks. My granddaughter has a cartoon character that likes to eat clocks. And we often tease each other about various inedible things and say, well, if we were, and then we name this cartoon character, we could certainly eat this. But we're not, we're human beings, so we don't eat rocks. Lichens eat rocks, but human beings don't eat rocks. In fact, there's very few things that eat rocks directly. We all eat rocks indirectly. And those minerals that we need constitute a couple of pounds or more of our bodies. Think about it. Our bones are made of minerals, our teeth are made of minerals, and what I call the great braid is the biggest mineral user of the body. And the great braid is the nervous system, the hormone system, and the immune system. If we think that any of these systems works by themselves, we've got another think coming. In fact, these systems work very, very closely together. And they all need large amounts of minerals. One of the things that I began to see very clearly when I first started studying nutrition and how to eat well for myself and how to help others eat well was that the modern diet does not contain as many minerals as our previous diets did. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One reason is that we have bred plants to be less bitter. In other words, literally to have less minerals in them. And because minerals often do taste bitter. Think about dandelion leaf. It doesn't taste bitter because it's poisonous. It tastes bitter because it's really loaded with minerals. So as we breed plants to have blander tastes, we tend to breed them to have less minerals. A further problem is the use of chemical or synthetic fertilizers on our soils. And the synthetic fertilizers tend to kill the microorganisms in the soil that actually make the minerals available to the plants themselves. So the plants grow, and they grow big, but they don't have the same mineral content because of the fertilizers that are used. So is this really important? Well, when we think that many of the minerals that we need are present in tiny amounts, and we're not talking about grams or even milligrams, we're talking about smaller amounts than that, and that some of these minerals are really critical to the functioning of the great braid, to the functioning of the immune system, the hormone system, the nervous system, but we do not need very much of them. We begin to see the real difficulty of shortfalls of minerals, not so grotesque that they're going to cause actual and direct symptoms from the lack of that mineral, but subtle full body effects that are first of all going to keep us from enjoying optimum health, and then eventually are going to lead to chronic and degenerative diseases as time goes on. Vitamins sounds like minerals. It's got that mins in it. And vitamins were at first thought to be especially active minerals, vital minerals, not just minerals that are vital to us, but vital as in moving. Now, as we began to explore the vitamins more closely, we began to see that no, in fact, that they're quite different from minerals. That the vitamins are, in fact, specialized kinds of proteins. They're enzymes. Whereas minerals are, well, they're atomic stuff, right? They're the minerals. You remember the periodic table of elements back from school with calcium, potassium, manganese, magnesium, and so on, all of the minerals on there. What makes things a little more complicated is that those minerals that you saw in the periodic table of elements aren't usable by living tissues. Those elements are whole and complete unto themselves, and they're not reactive, so they don't move very easily around or do much of anything. But as we said before, microorganisms in the soil act upon these minerals, and in doing so, they make them more reactive, and they make them willing to pair up with other things that are present in the soil. And these paired up minerals are now in a state that living tissues, plants, animals, humans, can very easily absorb and utilize them. We talked at some length when we talked about nourishment last month about the real importance of good gut flora. And I want to draw a strong parallel here that the real importance of good gut flora for happy, healthy human beings is exactly paralleled by the real importance of good soil microorganisms for happy, healthy soil and happy, healthy plants that make happy, healthy human beings. So just eating rocks wouldn't do it for us, even if we could, because the minerals haven't been acted on by soil microorganisms to make them into forms that we can easily utilize. Each one of our bodies is unique. We remember that the wise woman tradition nourishes the unique wholeness of each individual. And because each one of our bodies is unique, what that means is that while we may say that there's a recommended daily amount of a mineral that we need, that recommended daily amount might be too much or too little for any individual person. Not only that, when we read a chart and it says that a cup of nettle tea has this much calcium, or a cup of kale has this much calcium, those are averages, because this all depends on the soil microorganisms and how much minerals they are actually liberating into the soil, and thus for uptake by the plant roots. And minerals, as I said, are found in different forms. So we're not utilizing calcium directly. We're utilizing these combined, also called the salt forms of each one of these minerals, in order to feed our unique and individual health. We all need a variety of different salt forms of each one of the minerals. In other words, just getting a calcium supplement won't help most people. Perhaps this is why study after study finds that women who take calcium supplements double their risk of a broken bone. That one form of the calcium acts in a rather boorish way and doesn't let the other forms of calcium that are needed really get an opportunity, because we're taking so much of it. Whereas when we are getting, for instance, calcium from, say, yogurt, because we are getting it from the original herbal medicine, which is milk, because the animals ideally are out on pasture and eating pasture plants, so they're eating herbal medicines, and that's going into their milk. And those minerals have been acted on by soil microorganisms so that they are in living salt forms in the plants. The animal then ingests them and throws those minerals very easily into the milk, where they are easily and readily available to us. We also know that we can easily and readily get minerals in many, many forms by drinking our nourishing herbal infusions, whether it's an oat straw infusion or a stinging nettle infusion, whether it's a red clover infusion or a chickweed infusion. Any of the nourishing herbal infusions, and that's certainly not the entire list, but just 4 from it, violet leaf and on, are going to bring us minerals in forms that our body is uniquely adapted to use. These give us so much more than taking any kind of pill could ever do. Vitamins, as I said, were originally thought to be really active minerals, but turns out they're not minerals at all. In fact, what we really came to was that a vitamin is a substance whose absence causes a disease. And that is how we now talk about various vitamins, that in order to be in the list of vitamins, there has to be a disease state that goes along with that vitamin. Now, this idea of vitamins being enzymes, and not just enzymes, but collections of enzymes, can sometimes be a little difficult for people to grasp. The idea that there isn't one thing that's vitamin A or one thing that's vitamin C, but that vitamins are vital, moving, changing, groups of enzymes cooperating and working together. This asks us to open up and to think about our nutrition at a deeper and finer and more subtle level. We begin to understand that nature loves variety, and that energy loves to be expressed in enormous variety. I remember when I first started studying nutrition, we were told that there were antioxidant vitamins, and those antioxidant vitamins were vitamin A, vitamin C, and vitamin E. About 10 years later, we were told, well, there's antioxidant minerals as well. We have found that zinc and selenium actually act as antioxidants in the body. Now, the chart of antioxidants is so crowded we can hardly fit the new members in. It appears that everywhere we look, there are new antioxidants. Some of them are called polyphenols. Some of them are called catechins. Some of them are called anthocyanins. They have all kinds of interesting and fun names, and they push the envelope of vitamins. These are needed substances. They are antioxidants, but because their lack does not cause a disease, they have not been moved into the fold of vitamins, and yet they are as important as any of the standard and so-called vitamins. I often like to start when I'm talking about vitamins with talking about vitamin B, and that's because most people already know that vitamin B is not just one thing. That's familiar to you. Is that right, Gemini?
It is, yes.
So you know that there's more than one kind of B vitamin.
Yes, I think there's lots of them, isn't there?
There are. There's lots of B vitamins. And again, this is true of all of the vitamins. It's not just one separate thing that is each vitamin. It's these cooperative groups of enzymes which actually work together. So at this point, there are 17 known B vitamins. B17 is Laetrile. B12, cobalamin, right? And B12 is a limiting nutrient. It is one of the nutrients that our bodies cannot make on its own. The vast majority of vitamins our bodies can actually make. The two that our bodies seem incapable of making are vitamin B12 and vitamin C. And these are called limiting nutrients. In other words, we must ingest them. We don't know how to make them. The place in our bodies that makes B vitamins for us is a special little place very close to the appendix. It's right where the small intestine and the large intestine join up together. And so long as we are getting adequate amounts of fiber in our diet, especially indigestible fibers, insoluble fibers, they're sometimes called, like the pectin in apples, then the bacteria that live in this specialized place in our gut have all the raw materials they need to make all the B vitamins except for vitamin B12. So most people eat a diet that is pretty heavy in grains and beans, and both grains and beans are wonderful for fiber. And both grains and beans are themselves sources of B vitamins, and because they're so rich in fiber, our bodies are able to make B vitamins. And so this is pretty easy for most of us to get the B vitamins that we need. Now, some things that can interfere with it would be refining or hulling the grain. Unfortunately, great numbers of people who eat a diet that is mostly rice eat white rice in which much of the fiber has been removed from it. The brown rice means that it's not literally brown. It still cooks up white, not quite as white, but it still has the outer part, not the hard outer part of the rice. That is totally inedible. But the gymnosperm, the outer part of the actual seed, where the vitamin E is stored, where minerals are stored, where, in fact, everything is stored except for the starch. So when we eat refined grains, what we're getting is starch and not the fiber, the minerals, the vitamin E, and so on, that we should be getting from eating that grain. Fortunately for us, most beans are not refined or processed. And so when we are eating beans, we're generally getting everything we need from the bean, including the outer skin of the bean and any vitamin E that's in the bean. B vitamins, then, are generally not something that people really need to take in any quantity. One of the first people that I read about health and nutrition was Adele Davis, and Adele Davis was very much into B vitamin supplementation, but she thought that B vitamin supplementation was best done through the addition of brewer's yeast to the diet. Brewer's yeast is the spent yeast left generally after beer is made, and it is indeed loaded with B vitamins. When you ferment barley, you get 17 to 20 times more B vitamins through the fermentation process than you had in the original grain. As a matter of fact, fermentation often increases B vitamin content, and so it is frequently done. Grain beverages throughout the world are drunk because of the increased amount of B vitamins in them. So the yeast that is strained out or that falls to the bottom in the making of the beer is brewer's yeast, and it's loaded with B vitamins. And Adele Davis said, let's eat more of this and we'll get more B vitamins. And what she didn't count on was the fact that to most people it tastes bitter. It tastes bitter, it tastes nasty, it tastes funky. We ain't eating it. We don't like it. And so she looked about for a substitute, and what she found was nutritional yeast, which is a Saccharomyces yeast, just like the brewer's yeast, also Saccharomyces yeast, but it's not actually gone through a brewing process. So it doesn't come by its vitamins and minerals naturally. In fact, they are simply added to the nutritional yeast. And unfortunately, long-term consequences of her using that were not great for her bones. So neither nutritional yeast, because of the synthetic things in it, nor brewer's yeast because of the bad taste, are used at this point for vitamin B supplementation. But the sellers of pills still want to sell you B vitamins. And what's really interesting to me is that the B vitamins that are inexpensive to make are the ones that we need the least of, and the B vitamins that are expensive to make are the ones we need the most of. And so the industry has decided to make something called a balanced B supplement, in which you get the same amount of all B vitamin factors, which is not what your body needs at all. And this allows them to put in less of the ones your body needs more of, and more of the ones that your body needs less of. And so once again, we have to ask ourselves, are we creating optimum health? Are we simply taking a pill to try to stave off fear? Vitamin C is a complex of more than 100 different factors, ascorbic acid being merely one of the factors of vitamin C. When we reach up and pick some pine needles, when we bend down and pick a dandelion flower, when we reach out and eat a piece of fruit, we are getting vitamin C. The whole active vitamin C, the whole complex, all the enzymes working together, singing and playing together in lovely, lovely harmony. When we take a pill, we increase our risk for adult onset diabetes because we push our organs, we push the pancreas, we push the kidneys, we push the cells, and they begin to get a little more resistant to everything that is going on. Vitamins. Vitamin E is perhaps one of the most difficult vitamins for the modern human being to get. We used to get vitamin E from the seeds that we ate. I mentioned that grains contain some vitamin E. As a matter of fact, wheat germ oil is considered a superb source of vitamin E. That's the germ of the wheat. From the whole wheat, we get that. Beans contain a small amount of vitamin E. But one of the things that happens through processing is that we lose that vitamin E. Vitamin E is a vitamin that absorbs oxygen. And its 8 constituent parts, 4 tocotrienols and 4 tocopherols, have varying degrees of being affected by oxygen. But technically speaking, once the vitamin E has been freed from its place in some kind of seed, it goes rancid within 48 hours. So we could get vitamin E from whole wheat flour, but often the whole wheat flour is older than 48 hours, and so the vitamin E is not at the peak of its form. We could get vitamin E from our fats and oils, but often those oils have been pressed many months before and are stored in clear jars, which break down and damage the vitamin E. Olive oil sold in a tin so the light can't get to it, or in a black or dark green bottle, is usually vitamin E staple. And you just want to be sure that you get the most recent olive oil when you're buying olive oil. The other seed oils are very difficult for us to use because of the large amounts of omega-6 fatty acids, which we talked about last week when we were talking about the Weston Price and things that went on with Weston Price. Did I ask you last week if you were familiar with Weston Price?
Yes, and I am.
And so the ideas that Weston had brought forth weren't new ideas to you at all.
No, I'm familiar with his ideas, and with Sally Fallon, I think, who still is working with his ideas.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And if I didn't mention it, let me mention it now, and if I did, let me mention again that Sally Fallon has a wonderful DVD out called The Oiling of America. And I find that fats are quite confusing for people. And Sally really makes it very, very clear with lots of charts and graphs, and she really shows you how your body utilizes fat, why it's kind of a lie to say this is a saturated fat or this is a monounsaturated fat, because all fats have different kinds of fat within them. They're not just one thing. And how the ratios of those fats affect us, our health, and our eating. And I think that especially when we're talking about vitamin E, that we need to understand how the oiling of America changed the vitamin E status of many people. Remembering that if we resort to taking vitamin E supplements, that it directly increases our risk of lung cancer. And if we're diagnosed with any other kind of cancer and have been supplementing with vitamin E, we're 7 times more likely to die of that cancer than if we hadn't been supplementing with vitamin E. So vitamins and minerals are best received from our food. When we're talking about lifestyle medicine, we're not talking about using drugs. Anything that comes in a pill form is obviously a drug. And just to remind you about that wonderful little experiment that you can do, take 2 plants just the same. The only thing you're going to do different is that once a week you're going to water one with a nourishing herbal infusion like nettle leaf infusion, and the other one you're going to dissolve into some water, one of every pill that you take on a daily basis except for prescribed drugs, and you're going to use that water to water the other plant. It doesn't take very long for most people to decide that they'd rather look like the plant that's been watered with nourishing herbal infusion and not the plant that was watered with supplements.
So, Susan, that would explain why my aloe looks so good, because we put nourishing herbal infusion in it every morning, like the last little remnants of the jar.
And it's just thriving, huh?
Oh my gosh, yes.
And imagine what it would look like if you'd been feeding it water laced with supplements.
I can only imagine. But so I can attest to that. The nourishing herbal infusions are great for the plants.
And great for us, too. And I think that brings us to the end of our time this week, doesn't it?
It does. And thank you for another very informative show.
And we'll be back next week to jump into tonics and tonification.
Thanks so much, Susan.
Green blessings, everybody.
This concludes part 21 of our series, The 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.